Okay, now what we're going to look at is going to be, as I said, the sort of final question in your Scottish text exam, which accounts for the either 8 marks at National 5 or 10 marks at higher. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the structure of this question, or the structure of how to answer this question. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some example answers, okay, for this question. And yes, that will give you sort of an idea of how to do it. And it will give you an idea of exactly what to do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we'll do one together based on an example or a past paper and a past exam question. Okay, so when it comes to the final question, again, this is referred to as the 8-mark question at National 5 or the 10-mark question at higher. And it's called this because of the marks it's given at each level. Okay, again, this is 8 for National 5 and 10 for higher. What this question always asks you to do, okay, is to compare the text in some way. So if you're doing a novel if you're doing a novel, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be comparing between one part of the novel and another part of the same novel. So you could be comparing, for example, the beginning of Jekyll and Hyde to another part of Jekyll and Hyde. If you're doing a short story, what you're going to be doing is comparing between one short story and another separate short story by the same writer. Okay, so if you're doing, for example, a National 5 Donovan, you would be comparing, for example, between Dear Santa and Hieroglyphics. If you're doing a poem, then you're going to be comparing between one poem and another separate poem by the same writer. For example, if you're doing Duffy, you could be comparing between Originally and The Way My Mother Speaks. If you're doing McCaig, you could be comparing between Basking Shark and Assisi. You get the point. And if you are doing, this is for both National 5 and higher. If you're doing drama, if you're doing a play, again, you would be most likely comparing between one part of the play and another part of the same play. So to make it simple, if you're doing a novel, okay, a long book or a play, then a drama, then you're going to be comparing between two parts of the same text. Okay, maybe the beginning of the text and another part of the text. If you're doing poetry, you're going to be comparing between one poem and a different poem, two different poems. Okay, so one poem and another separate poem by the same writer. So novel and play, same text, comparing between parts of the same text. Poetry or short story, comparing between two different texts by the same writer. I'll say it again. Novel and play, same text. Okay, different parts of the same text. Poetry or short story, two different texts by the same writer. Okay, so that is essentially what you're going to be doing the question on. Now, in terms of the structure of your answer, what it's going to look like is as follows. Okay, so what you have first, I'll give you an overview and then I'll give you time to write this down. So first of all, you have 3 different sections. Okay, you have a commonality section, you have quotes from the exam paper section, and then you have quotes from memorized, okay, i.e. quotes that are not on the exam paper section. Now, in terms of the beginning, okay, so write this down. The first section is called the commonality section, okay, and the commonality section is all about laying out what you're going to be focused on and laying out, so that's the text that you're going to focus on, and then, or yeah, text that you're going to focus on, and then laying out what it is that you're going to, how it is that you're going to compare them. Now, the thing to know, okay, when you're looking first of all at commonality, is commonality is just another way of saying thing in common. So the question will tell you what to focus on. Okay, every question will tell you what they want you to focus on. So for example, here you have, excuse me, here you have the theme of youth. So it's asking you, how does this part of the play and another part of the play talk about the theme of youth? And if we look at prose quickly, then you have, how does this short story and another short story talk about the challenges of island life? And if we look at poetry, it's asking you, for example, and every final question will tell you what they want you to focus on. How does this poem and another poem explore the impact of significant experiences? Okay, and the thing it will ask you about will be related to the key theme of the poem, which is why we study key theme before we even get to this point. So what you'll be asked about is something which is sort of central to whatever text it is that you're studying. And what you need to do is you need to talk about how you see this in the two, either, like I said, if you're doing a novel or a play, how you see this in the part of the text that is here on the exam paper, and then in the part of the text that you've memorized. Or if you're doing a poem or a short story, again, same thing. How do you see that that thing, the commonality? How do you see that in the part of the text on the exam paper? And how do you see that in the poem, the quotes from, not the quotes, sorry, the other poem that you've got in your mind, the poem that's not on here, the short story that is not on here. Okay, now in terms of the structure, in terms of the way you do it, so that was just to give you sort of an idea of what you're doing. So what you're going to do is you're going to first of all begin by stating the name of the text. Okay, the name of the text. Sorry, this should be, yes, the name of the text. Text 2. Yes. Okay, now if it's just one text like Jekyll and Hyde, then you just mention Jekyll and Hyde. If it's more than one text, like you're doing 2 poems, you mention the 2 poems. So for example, you would say Basking Shark and Assisi, 2 names. Originally and the way my mother speaks, 2 names. Or if you're just doing one, Jekyll and Hyde, 1 name. Then you mention the question. So you literally just quote the question. So whatever the question asks you, you just quote that. So if I would, this is from Sailmaker, I believe. So you would say Sailmaker, okay, and this is just one text. Sailmaker is a play that in which the character of Alec is presented. I think that's from National 5, which is why it sounds so simple. Okay, if you're doing this, you would say Lockhead, you would say Boxroom and Revelation are plays that are poems which explore the impact of significant experiences. So you literally just quote whatever the question asks, basically. Quote whatever the question asks. Okay, next is you're going to now say how you see that commonality in the extract. And remember, extract just means the text that's on the exam paper. So you just say in the extract, and then you quote again whatever it is you're talking about. So for example, significant experiences. In the extract, we see the poet exploring significant experiences by, and then you would just give an example. You don't need to quote, you just say in your own words sort of what the extract, the exam paper talks about. Okay, and then you do the same thing for how you see that elsewhere, okay? How you see that in the text, not on the exam paper, okay? And then what you're going to do is, again, just give like a basic sort of example. Just to give you a quick example, if you're doing a CC and Basking Shark, and the question was about the idea of things being judged based on how they look, you would say in the extract we see, and this would be in basking shark. In basking shark, we see something being judged by the way it looks, in how the speaker judges the shark and believes it to be a monster or believes it to be a predator, even though just based on how it looks, something like that, simple. And then you would say in Assisi, we see someone being judged by how they look, in that the beggar is judged to be an evil person who should be avoided, due to him being looking disabled, and so on, like that, something simple. Now, what this does is it's going to set you up for the next section, in which you're going to quote and you're going to go into detail in terms of your analysis. So you don't need to quote up here. Okay, you don't quote up here. You just basically are laying out what it is you're going to talk about when you get to these sections. Okay? And now the next part is going to be your first set of quotes, which is going to be your first 2 quotes, okay, on the exam paper. And this is 2 quotes, whether 2 quotes from National 5 and higher, it's the same at both levels. You're going to put 2 quotes, okay, and these are going to be from the exam paper, so you don't need to memorize these. They'll already be there for you to look at. And then you're going to analyze them. And again, I would very much recommend you just analyze them via word choice. And when you analyze them, you're just going to analyze them in a way that connects them back to what you said here. So, for example, if my quotes are from Basking Shark, and I said a quote from Basking Shark, Matchbox Brain, that comes from Basking Shark. So I put that quote here, Matchbox Brain, and I'd say word choice, and then I'd say matchbox. This relates to something small, relates to fire. This suggests that the speaker judges the shark to be a fiery, angry, unintelligent, because small, unintelligent creature based on how it looks. So again, you want to connect it back to your commonality, okay? Whatever it is you mentioned here about that text, you want to connect it back to this. So this, okay, connects to this, to the first thing that you said, yeah, to the first commonality part. Okay, and you do that twice. Then, okay, you come to the final part. The final part of the question, the final part of your answer, is going to be either 4 quotes, and this is quotes that are not on the exam paper, so you need to memorize these. You need to memorize these in advance. Now, it's 4 quotes at National 5, worth 4 marks, and it's 6 quotes at higher, worth 6 marks. Again, you need to memorize these before you go into the exam. Okay, and these are going to be the quotes that are on the other poem. So for example, again, if I was doing Assisi and Basking Shark, these would be my quotes on Assisi. And the way you analyze them is the exact same as the way you analyzed the first 2. You just connect them to the second commonality, okay? To the second commonality part, what you said about the second text. Make sense? You say something about the first text up here, you connect your first 2 quotes from the first text or from the first part of the text, yeah, to that. You say something about what's on the exam paper up here. You connect your first 2 quotes from the exam paper to that. You say something about what's not on the exam paper here, and then you connect your 6 or 4 quotes, which you memorized, to that. So again, for example, if I was going to do a CC here, I would say hands on backwards, and I would take backwards word choice relates to being deformed, being disabled, being seen as unintelligent or unmodern, old-fashioned. Okay, the idea of being backwards, not intelligent, old-fashioned. Then I'd say this suggests that people see the beggar as being unintelligent, old-fashioned, and ugly due to the way he looks. Again, connecting it back to what I said in the commonality section. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you an example from one of my students. Okay, and this is one originally, and Mrs. Okay, this is on Mrs. Midas and Mrs. Tilsher's classroom. Okay, so ignore the top part which says originally, forget that. Ignore this. Okay, so this is on Mrs. Tilsher's and Mrs. Midas, and theme of loss. Yes. Okay, so the question was, how does the writer portray the theme of loss? How do you see the theme of loss in the poems? So she has chosen Mrs. Midas, that was the extract, that's the one on the exam paper. And she chose Mrs. Tilsher's class, and that was the one on, not on the exam paper, that's the one she had quotes memorized for. Okay, so she begins, again, in her commonality part. Remember, the first thing to do is state the name of the text and mention the question. So she begins by saying, the writer uses Mrs. Midas to Mrs. Midas, there's the name of the text. Theme of loss, there's the question. And then she explains, giving an example. Okay, giving an example of how do we see the theme of loss. Through the deterioration in relationship between Mrs. Midas and her husband, i.e. she loses the relationship. And then giving an example, we see what happens. Okay, then she does the same thing for the other text, which is Mrs. Tilsher. And again, you see name of the text, quote the question, and then example of what is the commonality yet. So again, commonality here was theme of loss. You see the key parts, quote, name the text, quote the question, give the example, what you see in terms of the commonality. Okay, and then she goes on to give the quotes. So there's her first quote. Okay, this is from the exam papers, from the extract. There's her explanation. She uses simile here. Again, I would just recommend that you use word choice. It's the simplest. But she uses simile, and you see at the end of her answer, she connects it back to what she said, okay, up here in terms of the commonality. And then again, same thing. Here, had to move out, sentence structure. And again, connects it back to what she said in terms of the commonality. Okay, now we go on to the final part, which is 6 quotes for hire, 4 quotes for Nat 5 that she had memorized. So here's our first quote. She uses metaphor, she uses imagery. And at the end, you see how she connects it to the commonality, yeah? What she said about that text, or what she said, again, if this was just one text, it would be what she said about what's not on the extract, yeah? What's not on the exam paper, the other part. Okay. And again, there's number 2, she's word choice. And lost the urge, again, she connects it. So you see, every time she puts the quote, uses the technique, then she goes ahead and she connects it back to the point that she made, yet to the commonality, to the correct part of the commonality. Remember, in the first part, yeah, in this part, quotes from the exam paper, you connect it to the commonality statement, which is about the exam paper. And then the second part, quotes that are not in the exam paper, you connect it to the commonality statement about what's not on the exam paper. Okay. So I have some practice questions here. And okay, I don't actually think we need to do one together because I've just shown you some very good examples. Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll just put this, okay, into the files at the end. And yeah, that should be enough to sort of understand. Yeah, that should be enough to understand. Okay, so I'll put these in the files at the end. And That is the 10 mark or the 8 mark question. Okay, good.